American songwriter, we had the chance to talk to Samantha Crain.
Adam was able to talk to Samantha over Zoom audio. Check out her new EP, A Small Death.
Make sure to check us out on YouTube and Facebook at Bringing It Backwards and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bringing Back Pod.
We'd appreciate your support if you follow and subscribe to our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're Bringing It Backwards with Samantha Crain.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great.
Cool. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so our podcast is about your journey in the music industry and how you got to where you are today.
Okay.
Cool. So, where did you grow up, Samantha?
I grew up on the outskirts of a town called Shawnee, Oklahoma. So, sort of like the more rural areas of that town. I think when I was growing up, it was around like 15,000, which probably sounds really small to people that like grew up in any sort of like sizable city. But if you're from the Midwest, that's just like a pretty good sized town. But I grew up like going to country schools mainly, so in smaller communities around that town.
Oh, okay. Where's there, like, how did you get into music?
Well, it's, I guess, kind of like a long, convoluted story. Do you want to know, like, specifically how I got into music or how my interest started, or?
Let's hear it all. I don't know. Yeah, it's really however you, doesn't matter. I'm just curious, how did you get into music in general?
Well, I think my initial introduction to music is through church. My dad was a Southern Baptist sort of evangelical traveling preacher of sorts. He was also a power lifter, so he would do like these. He would go to these revivals, like whenever you think of like tent revivals in small towns and things, he would go to those and do sort of like feats of strength, various, like he would lift a bunch of weight, or he would like tear a giant phone book in half, or like he would break bricks or something, and then he would preach, and then he would also play music, because he fancied himself a bit of a folk singer as well, because he grew up playing his like coffee shop with his brother and stuff growing up. And so that was sort of my introduction to music, was just through Southern Baptist revival services and church and what my dad was doing with those. But I didn't really personally get involved in any sort of music. It didn't really, I would sing at church and stuff, but I didn't really get into playing or writing until I was in high school, and I, started getting into my quintessential like emo phase. Nobody understands me. I am a loner, and having a lot of time alone in my bedroom, mulling over the complexities of life. And, just your run-of-the-mill, like, emotional poetry from a 16 or 17-year-old, and a guitar laying around the house sort of transformed into my first foray into songwriting. And it just kind of went from there. I didn't really find a place that worked for me in terms of like schooling after high school. I've always considered myself a bit of an autodidact and pretty like stubborn when it comes to being taught how to do anything. I've always just kind of like to
do it your own way.
Yeah, it's just kind of unfortunately how it is for me. But back then the internet was like a new thing and, information at your fingertips. And it was sort of a golden age of there just being all of these weird places where a DIY musician could play and have that opportunity. Coffee shops, record stores, um, restaurants, small venues, small DIY venues, house shows, those sorts of things. That was like a really, I don't want to use the term bustling because it wasn't necessarily like an organized circuit, but it was really easy to like set up a well, I won't say it's really easy, but if you had sort of the uh, DIY go get 'em sort of attitude, you could, set yourself up a MySpace page, get on some of these websites like Indie on the Move or Midwest. There was one called like Midwest Venue Directory or something like that, where
Mm-hmm.
they were just directories of all of the places that bands had been setting up shows and how to contact the people that were in charge of them. And you kind of just like figure out what cities you wanted to play in and write a bunch of emails every day and kind of hodgepodge yourself together some tours. And that was how I got started, really, was just
Mm-hmm.
doing that. I definitely was really green. I definitely put the horse before the cart. I wasn't necessarily like very good. I had like maybe 5 songs, but I just wanted to do something, and that's kind of how it started.
Mm-hmm. Well, when did you said you found a guitar just lying around the house? Is kind of how you started to play.
Yeah, well, it was my dad's guitar. He had
Mm-hmm.
this like, believe it or not, I learned how to play on one of the most like difficult guitars you would ever try to learn how to play guitar on, which is just a 12-string massive dreadnought Martin uh, D12, which was what his guitar was.
Okay.
And that's what I learned on, which is hilarious to think of. Like, I have enough issues wrapping my tiny hands around the neck of a guitar as it is now, as like a seasoned guitar player. I can't
Sure.
imagine that I was making very nice sounds as a beginning guitar player trying to get my tiny hands around the massive neck that is a D12.
Yeah, and a 12 string that how it like those are probably a nightmare to tune alone. Like
Oh yeah, they're
not
never really in tune. Like you just have to accept that it sounds a little bit out of tune. That's the point of a 12 string, I think.
the point of it is to be a little bit out of tune.
Exactly.
Oh wow. So okay, so you learn on the 12 string. When did you start writing songs? Like immediately after picking up some chords?
Totally. Yeah, I was just sort of I went to Music Unlimited, which is like the local Shawnee music store that sells guitars and sheet music and trumpets and whatever else you needed,
Mm-hmm.
and found a beginner's guitar chord book. And I probably taught myself like 4 chords to begin with, probably like probably G, C, E minor, and D. That's probably where I started, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of learned those, drilled those for myself, and then probably closed that book and was like, cool, I know 4 chords. That means I can write songs now. And just sort of started coming up with, mainly just like taking my sort of emotional teenage poetry and kind of figuring out how to um, sing it over those chords, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when did you start like the first EP you put out? Like when did you have the confidence to go in the studio and start recording songs?
Well, the thing about being young and naive is you get confidence way before it suits you to have the confidence. That like you have confidence before you probably should have it, I would say. Um, but I think I was see when I recorded the Confiscation EP, I was 19, I think. So um, right out of high school, I had been doing sort of this DIY touring circuit of sorts, and I met this guy named Joey Lemon who was in a band called Barry, which was doing a lot of touring in the Midwest at the time,
Mm-hmm.
sort of the indie band DIY venue circuit. And I went on tour with them, opening for them, and then after the end of one of those tours, he had a sort of recording set up in the basement of the house that he was living in at the time, and he produced and helped me record that EP. I actually found a photo from that recording session recently, and it was like, it was hilarious, our setup. It was like an actual desktop, like Dell computer with a screen that actually had like the depth to the screen, like the actual monitor had like depth to the monitor.
Oh, weird.
And like it had like a giant tower where the the actual computer was one of those giant like Dell towers, and I think we were running it through like the Pro Tools DigiDesign, which was like one of the first sort of interfaces that was accessible through like Musician's Friend and things like that. So it's kind of hilarious to look back at that setup and think about how hard and slow it probably was to make that EP, considering what we have access to in 2020. But
Sure. Yeah. What a difference, huh? In just like a few years.
yeah.
What technology makes. Well, so you were touring and stuff already before you had that EP out.
Yeah, I had like some sort of demo type recordings that I had just made. I think at just like my uncle's house. My uncle had like a sort of 4-track thing, and I recorded, I think, like 3 or 4 songs and just burnt copies of those songs on CDs and like handmade these like little sleeves for them, and I would use those to like sell at shows or send to bookers to book shows. And I was also sending those out to, I was doing the thing that they tell you not to do and would never work, which is like send your actual demos to the physical addresses of record labels.
Oh, right. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
mailing them your demo CD or whatever.
Yeah, I was actively doing that. Probably mailed out 40 or 50, I would assume. And
Wow.
yeah.
How did that, did you get any responses?
Yeah, I did. I actually did get a couple of responses, which I won't go into those because I didn't end up like signing with those labels, and those didn't end up like going through. But looking back on it, it's kind of funny knowing like what those labels have turned into now, and that was like the beginning of some of those labels.
Okay.
And that have like actually done really well. But the label that I ended up signing with, it's actually a funny story because Ramseur Records, who I've been with since my very first EP, I knew about them at the time because I had just been introduced to the Avett Brothers and was liking their music at the time a lot. And so I just thought, well, I think I could probably like fit in with that label pretty well. And so I got my CD together. I got like probably like a printed off 8x10 like press photo that I probably took myself on a digital camera, like in my attic or something. And then I wrote like a letter, probably because I always wrote letters to that would go in these packs about like why I would be a good fit on their label and that sort of thing. And
That's smart.
I guess
It's
I
like doing
doubt
your
most
research on the record, yeah, or label at least.
I doubt most of them got read, but yeah, this one ended up, the only reason Dolph even heard it, Dolph is the guy that owns Ramseur Records.
Okay.
The only reason he even heard it is because I guess he just had like, well, like most people that work at a label, all of those sort of unsolicited demos end up in a giant pile somewhere, like in the corner. They don't get opened, really. They just kind of like sit, and then every year they probably get trashed. But one day he was at home and he had like walked by his son's bedroom, who was probably only like 4 or 5 years old at the time, I think. And he was listening to something and Dolph didn't know what it was. And he was just like, what are you listening to? And he's like, I don't know. I found it in that pile over there. And he, it was my CD, and he really liked it and sort of sent me an email and we started talking, and I ended up signing with him. So it was like
Wow.
all because his 4-year-old son dug it out of that like pile of demos, that he even heard it. And so yeah, you
That's
probably still,
crazy.
yeah, it's kind of a funny story. And
Yeah.
I have released all my records on that label so far.
That's cool. Like when you signed to them, did they, aside from probably funding your records, like what did they do for you right away?
Well, so Ramseur Records is a bit of it's more like an independent sort of label. So it's not necessarily like complete funding of everything,
Okay.
but they do have, you get distribution and marketing and press and just that like added sort of bit of management help to make connections with people. And he hooked me up with a booking agent, which was nice considering I was spending a massive amount of time at that point of my life booking these like hilarious DIY tours, playing in, any place I could find.
Hmm.
And so at that point, he hooked me up with a booking agent, which made touring a bit more purposeful. I think we weren't just we were. I was like playing places that made more sense, or getting to like open for bands that were actually like helping further things a little bit. Like we got to go on tour with the Avett Brothers and Langhorne Slim pretty quickly, and some other bands that kind of helped broaden our base, I guess.
Hmm. That's cool. Yeah. So they kind of hooked you. They were able to get you on some tours and get you in front of some bigger crowds.
Totally, yeah.
Nice. So after you do that tour, you're touring on the first EP. When do you start writing the next record?
Well, really, by the time we got signed, I had already written all the songs for the first record, with the first full-length record, which
Oh,
was,
okay. Songs in the
yeah,
Night. That was already
yes.
ready to go.
Yeah, it was already ready. And I had hooked up at the same time that I was getting signed. I had like put together this band called Samantha Crain and the Midnight Shivers. So that was actually what the first record was released under that band name. Um, and yeah, I had already written those songs and it was like ready to be recorded. And Ramseur Records is based out of North Carolina,
Hmm.
and they hooked us up with Echo Mountain Studios, which is in Asheville. And it's like this really gorgeous old church that's been like turned into a recording studio. And we went out to Asheville and recorded that whole record, I think, in a period of about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the first record came out pretty quickly, after we like they released my EP that had already been recorded, and then I think probably just like not even a year later, the Songs in the Night came out. So it was a pretty quick like turnover.
Hmm. With that record, what was like the big milestone from it? Do you remember?
I think with that record we started getting just like better gigs. Like I just remember we played a bunch of festivals that year that seemed just amazing to me. We were getting to like play on the same stages as bands that I really looked up to. So I just remember that being like a really heavy touring year. We played Bonnaroo, we played Pickathon, we played
Wow.
Floyd Fest. Like we just got like all of these great festival opportunities from that record. So I do remember feeling like probably a little more, I mean, in a naive way, I think, just like not understanding that like it is such a fickle industry, and like just because you're on an upward trajectory does not mean that that roller coaster cannot come back down for a while before it goes back up, sort of thing. And so I think in my mind, I just was like, yeah, like I'm doing it. We've got this. Like it's only up, only up from here, sort of thing.
Sure.
But it was a lot. It was a lot of fun, kind of going from. I mean, we were still touring in like a hilariously small, like Ford F-250 with our gear in the truck bed, but it it still felt like we were finally like a part of like a community of musicians that were like being taken somewhat seriously, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And then the next album you put out was You.
Yeah, you understood, and that one was a bit of like a departure, mainly because the band that I had put together for Songs in the Night, we were all like really young and like partying like super hard, and just like our idea of what a band should be like was like from that. Have you ever seen the documentary Dig?
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
I love
so
that
like,
documentary
yeah, it's a
about
great.
Brian Jonestown Massacre.
Yeah, and the Dandy Warhols. Yeah. So I
Mm-hmm.
think like for us, we were like, that's what a rock and roll band does. That's like how they live. And they're like crazy and super dramatic and just all over
Sure.
the place. And then of course we watched a ton of, young Bob Dylan interviews where he's like, just super smart aleck and just making things up. And we were trying to embody that because that's what we thought that like that's what we thought like rock bands did. And that's not like a sustainable model. Like you're gonna party yourself out, you're gonna like things are gonna blow up, and you're gonna have fights. And that's what happened. Like that band broke up, and then You Understood, I made as sort of my like gathering myself, trying to figure out what direction I wanted to go in, setting off, on my own more or less from there. So that was an interesting time in my life. I remember being like really shaky about like my confidence and things like that. But, there's some songs off that record that I think have, stood the test of time as far
Mm-hmm.
as like still being in my set list and that sort of thing.
And then you put out a couple, like a 2-song, 7-inch, A Simple Jungle.
Yes, that was my first meeting and working with John Vanderslice, who produced my following 3 records. So that was sort of the beginning of my relationship with him, and recording at his studio out in San Francisco, Tiny Telephone, which
Mm-hmm.
RIP is actually closing this week. But they
Oh,
have,
is it?
yes,
That's too
but
bad.
well, they have an annex in Oakland now that they still have. And so Tiny Telephone itself is still alive, but the original San
Building.
Francisco studio is being decommissioned this week, after like I think 25 or 30 years or something.
Wow. But
Yeah.
he's just moving it over to Oakland.
Yeah, most of the stuff, like the Oakland studio's already been in operation for like 2 or 3 years now, but they're
Okay.
moving. Yeah, so it's a solid studio and like ready to take on all of the work that was happening at the San
San
Francisco
Francisco one.
studio. Yeah, but it's just
Got
kind
it.
of like the end of a pretty cool little like era
Mm-hmm.
of original like tape recording studios, I guess.
Yeah. And how did you meet John Vanderslice?
Um, I think he was just recommended to me through Dolph. I think Dolph is a really big fan of analog recording.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a bit of like an audiophile in terms of like, has a really nice sort of vinyl stereo setup and loves to like sit in front of his nice speakers and listen to a record on vinyl, and likes it even more if it was recorded fully analog and, mastered without the use of computers and that sort of thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think he, you know, I think he found out about John and Tiny Telephone through that. And I was actually already a fan of John Vanderslice just in terms of his records.
Mm-hmm.
I'd been listening to them. And I didn't really know anything about his studio or that he produced or anything like that. And so I just decided, we could go out and do this little couple songs, see how I worked with him. Because I'd never made a record with somebody, like I'd always just made records with people that I knew, like my friends, like
Mm-hmm.
standing in as sort of like producers or engineers. And so I just wanted to go out there and see how he worked and see how the studio was and if it was going to work for what I did. And so me and my drummer at the time, Anne, just went out there and recorded 2 songs that became A Simple Jungle. And I loved working with him so much that we pretty immediately booked studio time to record my next record, which was called Kid Face.
Okay. And then you worked with him on the next 3 records that came out after that?
Yes, I worked with him on Kid Face, and then the record after that called Under Branch and Thorn and Tree, and then the record after that, which
You
was
Had Me at
called
Goodbye?
Yes.
And you have a new record coming out as well.
Yes, it's out today, actually.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thanks.
And did you also work on that record with John Vanderslice?
No, I actually produced that one myself here in Oklahoma City, and worked just at a small studio here that my friend Brian Webb runs. It's called Lunar Manor Recording Studio. It's like this weird little subterranean studio in the basement of a bank building in Oklahoma City. I think it used to be like an old advertising agency's recording studio. So like for, like the TV show Mad Men, how they do commercial ads, and they have to have like orchestras come in for soundtracks, or they have to have someone come in to do voiceovers for commercials or something.
Uh-huh.
That's what this studio was, I think, originally used for, like in the 60s or 70s. And it was sort of decommissioned and completely torn apart, and then kind of refound, I guess, about 10 years ago, I think.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, I produced that one myself and just used sort of a skeleton crew of awesome musicians from around the area in Norman and Tulsa and Oklahoma City.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll talk. I want to talk to you more about the new record. Well, real quick, what were like the milestones from Kid Face and Under the Branch and Thorn Tree, and You Had Me at Goodbye?
Good question. Let's see. Kid Face, that would have been... Well, Kid Face was the first record where I moved into releasing records abroad. Like I signed with a UK label for that record as well. So
Wow.
I started getting to tour a lot more in Europe and UK.
How was that? Was that cool going there for the first time?
Yeah, so fun. And yeah, it's just been really, really amazing. I think that around that time was also, we were getting to tour with some pretty amazing artists. We went on a tour with a couple of tours with First Aid Kit and Josh Ritter and Brandi Carlile, I think, around that time as well.
Wow.
So it was like a really good touring year. Yeah, but that album was also released in Europe and UK by this great little label called Full Time Hobby. And I'm trying to think what else we did for that record. Yeah, I think I was just touring in UK a lot around that time.
Okay. And then that's why I also saw that you got like Rolling Stone Press and Spin and NME were talking about it, and that must have been a pretty cool experience.
Yeah. I think that record I think did stand out to a lot of people as like sort of me finally kind of settling into my own voice, I think. Like I was talking about, like because I got started, I think I guess not any younger than a lot of people get started, but I think I was just like pretty emotionally unintelligent about what I was doing and like sort of just flying by the seat of my pants and didn't really have like a mentor of any sort to like help me along. I think it took me, a couple of records to really sort of find my stride and figure out what my voice was as a songwriter. And I think a lot of people would say that like Kid Face was sort of the record where I started really finding that voice, I think.
Yeah.
There's a song on there called For the Minor, which was written for Jason Molina, who was sort of one of my like favorite songwriters since I was in high school. I found his records when I started writing songs, and I just remember him being like a huge influence in terms of wanting to write songs because I connected so intensely with what he was doing. And I think a lot of people, that record came out around the time of his death, and I think that connected with a lot of people as well, because a lot of people felt that way about Jason Molina, and they had a song to kind of connect with that.
Wow. Yeah. And then with Under the Branch, Thorn and Tree, that was your next release.
Yes, and we did that out at Tiny Telephone as well with John Vanderslice, and we had the Magic Orchestra on that. So it's a great like bit of musicians from the Bay Area that played, in terms of, it was like a little string orchestra that we had, which I had always wanted to include, and so we got to do that. And trying to think what else was around that time. There's a song called Elk City on that record that I think sort of got us into helped lead us into the streaming world a bit, which was like something that I didn't really know anything about and still don't really understand. But a lot of people that are in charge of the playlists and things like that like really connected with that song, and so that kind of helped us into that realm, I think, of like the whole Spotify thing.
Yeah, because that song has like over 2 million plays on Spotify.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not really sure, but yeah.
Yeah, so you don't know if it got playlisted or did get playlisted.
Yeah,
you're not sure like how that all happened. It just kind of did.
I'm assuming that was what happened. I mean, like, it did get on a lot of playlists when it came out, and I think that helped kind of intro us into that world of getting in the people that make those playlists, like getting in their ears a little bit. So
sure. Cool. And then the next record, the most, not the most recent, but the one that you had one that came out today, but then before that you had another album, right?
Yeah, You Had Me at Goodbye. And that one was I was super proud of that record, and it was kind of a bummer how it all shook down, but basically that was around the time that I had gotten in 3 car wrecks. Well, as that record was about to come out, I had gotten in like 3 car wrecks all in the period of 3 months. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I just like to preface that with saying that like I was hit every time. Like, it wasn't me. I'm not like a bad driver or anything like that.
Right. Were they serious accidents, all of them?
Well, the first one was very serious, and it was actually, I sustained like some bad injuries from that. And that sort of
Wow.
led into this really dark period for me, which was my I've already had problems with tendonitis and carpal tunnel in my hands and wrists, and that initial car wreck really catapulted that pain that I was already dealing with into a really unmanageable place. So much so that I had to cancel the tour that was connected to that record. I went ahead
Oh,
and did
wow.
the UK tour, but I was in so much pain through the whole tour that I called my agent and I was like, I have to cancel the US part. Like, I can't do this again. And I was just like, yeah, it was just like too painful. And so I went home and just really kind of like spiraled mentally like into, panic attacks and a pretty dark place because my hands were just getting like progressively worse to the point where I would wake up and it would take, an hour or two before I'd even get like feeling in my hands and
Wow.
arms. And so that was sort of the beginning of the really dark period that sort of led to eventually what I ended up writing this newest record, A Small Death, about.
Oh, okay. So the latest record is about everything that happened after the accident.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wow. So, and was it hard? Was it difficult to put those feelings out into song, or going that direction with the record?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm one of those songwriters that tends to be I use like the creative process as catharsis. So by the time that I am writing about it or recording a song about something that's happened to me, it's because I've already taken the time to process it mentally apart from that, and I just use the sort of writing and recording of the ideas that are in the song as a way to move on from it. So I don't think it was the actual making of the record wasn't hard. It was all of the work that had to kind of be done in between, just like in my personal life of sort of, I don't know, like reconstructing my identity because without the like physical ability to play instruments at the time, it was a really hard circumstance to kind of I don't know, understand like who I was, because like for so long, for the majority of my like adult life, my sort of identity that I had attached to myself was like, I'm the musician. I'm a musician, Samantha Crain. I tour, I write songs, I make records. And at that time, I had to kind of strip all of that away, get to know myself from scratch, because I was just like, okay, well, if I can't do this anymore, then I'm going to have to like figure out who I am and what parts of myself that I like and what parts I don't, and work on this. And so it was kind of like getting to know myself from the bottom up for the first time, and learning about my different curiosities and sensitivities, and which at first was like a really hard process to start. But as it went on, it became a really enlightening experience for me.
That's good. Yeah. And the record came out today, which is exciting. Was it weird putting it out in this current situation everyone's in with the quarantine?
Yes and no. I think I've kind of come to terms with that the weird feeling, I guess, because it was initially supposed to come out May 1st, and we ended up moving it back early on in this sort of pandemic because we thought, you know, to give it, I mean, with the way that independent musicians make their living now, it's not from record sales, it's from touring. And so we thought, you know, to give it a fighting chance, we'll try to move it back, and then hopefully we can do touring around it. That did not happen, even though we moved the release back. And I'm not going to be able to tour this year, but I think I just wanted to get it out. Like I'm a very project oriented person, and I can't really move on from things until like I've got like that closure on a project. And so I
Sure.
just needed to get it out. I was like, my brain is needs to move on to the next thing. And so we just went ahead and like stuck with that second release date, which was today. But I think there is something kind of nice about putting a record out during this time, because you kind of get to just put it out and kind of be quiet. Like you don't have to like do the continual talking about yourself, come to my shows, you know, tell your friends. You don't have to do the constant hype, I think, because right now everyone just kind of knows that would feel a bit weird to try to do in this current environment, and you get kind of a pass, which I think releasing a record and then kind of getting to move on and be quiet about it is a bit more in line with like how I personally would like to release records, and a bit more in line with maybe my values as a person or something. So it's kind of nice to do it, honestly.
Are you what approach do you have as far as like getting the songs out to the world, or like letting people know about it? Like, how are you going to promote it? Like Instagram Live? Have you been doing any of that stuff?
No, I don't really like. I'm not. That's kind of what I mean. Like, I kind of am not doing a lot of that. Like, I just kind of want to put it out and let people listen to it. And I know that that's probably not like
Like the conventional way of doing it.
not conventional. I mean, maybe it used to be back in the day, but I just don't. I feel like it would be weird and bordering on like insensitive of me if I was trying to like shove myself down people's throats when people are having problems, like, you know, paying their bills, and you know, are worried about the safety of their kids and their friends and their what's going on in their communities. I think that I made a record that people can, you know, relate to during this time, and hopefully it helps some people deal with a lot of that. But I'm trying not to kind of follow the run of the mill of like Uber promotion machine this time around. It just doesn't feel right now, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand that for sure. Well, I mean, like, so the record's out. Like, do you have any plans? You're just gonna let it breathe for a while and wait and see what happens with the world as far as touring goes?
Yeah, basically. I kind of like have told people I'm not trying to be you know, ahead of the curve with this like jumping back into touring. Like I know a lot of times like people want to be, you know, the first to do something, get on the train early sort of thing, but like have no interest in trying to be like a leader in the forefront of getting back into the world of touring. Like I kind of just want to sit back and see how things happen, like what's going to be the most safe for people and myself, I guess. And so I'm just gonna like sit back and hope it doesn't take too long, because I'm gonna have to start getting real creative with how to pay my bills soon. But you know, I just want to make sure that we're fully thinking everything through and have like a little bit more information or some sort of tools, some like actual tools to use to kind of re-enter into that part. And maybe the traditional way of touring does not happen again. Like, that's kind of really sad to think about. But if that's the case, I am going to need some time to think about like what a new model of that looks like for me that's safe and reasonable for everyone.
Sure. Yeah, I know. We'll have to just see how this all kind of unfolds, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for talking with me today. I really, really appreciate your time.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you.
I have one more question. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Yeah, I think I would just say to really like trust your gut. I think that the way that things are set up with art or music or anything is people are really quick to have an opinion on your art or your music or what you're doing or how you look or any of that. And you can really easily and quickly start losing your voice and what is unique and special about you if you start going down the rabbit hole of listening to all of that. And I think we're all going to make mistakes no matter if you're listening to those people or not, but at least the mistakes are going to be your own mistakes, and you're not going to be I guess resentful of it if you just kind of trust your gut and stay true to